Ohio State and Michigan in the big house. The big house this weekend. Joe, this is one of, I will just say, even as a guy that's from the South, I've lived in the South my entire life, you could make the argument that Ohio State and Michigan is the biggest rivalry in college football. Okay. Maybe not in all of college athletics, meaning it's more mainly just always football that this game is reverberated around. I think we're in store for another very close game. I know this is going to sound stupid and it's going to sound crazy. Like, no duh, Blake. This is what every game comes down to. We're going to talk about a lot of different things. We're going to talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. versus Prather at Michigan. We're going to talk about him probably going up against Johnson on the outside. There's a lot of different things that you can talk about in this Ohio State and Michigan game. One thing, though, that I think whoever is the better quarterback on Saturday, they're going to win, because I see a lot of these teams in a very similar light. A very similar light. I think they have a lot of the same accolades defensively, but the only thing for me, okay, is watching a lot of Ohio State film today. I'm going down and I'm watching. I'm like, man, they're not really running the ball as effectively as I thought that they could. If they're not able to establish a pretty strong running game, they're 84th in the country, tied for 84th, I believe, in rushing yards per game, only averaging 4.3 yards per carry. If you're not able to run the football successfully against Michigan, Michigan's secondary has been good. We saw them really get tested last week against Maryland, and they're going to have a very tough test in this Ohio State core. But, man, you're going to have to run the football effectively in this game, and I think that they'll be able to find a way to do that. I think that this is a close one, but I feel like, as crazy as this sounds, Kyle McCord has been more steady, okay, at Ohio State than what J.J. McCarthy has been over the last 3 weeks. Now, I know that McCarthy apparently had an ankle injury, but it doesn't stop the fact, even if he is banged up a little bit, McCord has played better than him this season, right? Like, this season, McCord has been better.
I think you bring up a really good point, first of all, with Ohio State's run game. Since Travion Henderson has come back and been healthy, they have really picked up a lot of juice.
They have.
That how they run the football, I think, plays into this. You brought up the J.J. McCarthy discussion, and there were a lot of comments on the reaction that we did yesterday talking about that. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, he's banged up. Almost as if it was an excuse. If the kid's banged up and that's the way he's playing, is he going to be healthy for this game?
The point, Joe, than what we were trying to make last night in reference to him not playing good the last 2 weeks.
Right. Healthy or not, he's making mistakes and he's not playing clean football. If that version of J.J. McCarthy is the one that's going to be on the field because he's battling an injury, all the credit to him. I love it when guys fight tooth and nail to stay on the field. I think that it's a huge rallying point for a team. But if he's going to play that sloppy and he can't drive the ball, which kind of seems like that's part of the case here, that's a concern. The quarterback play is something that I had strongly considered for what's going to be important for this. McCord provides an advantage for Ohio State because of what you just said. He's very steady. I mean, he's king check down in a way where he's going to take the simple throws when they're there. He's not going to take a lot of risks. And in some instances that stalls the offense a little bit. And I think that Michigan, who's just so stout in their secondary along their defensive line, this isn't a game where you're going to win by just taking the easy throws. You're going to have to take some challenging shots. What I was really hung up on, though, Blake, and why I think right now I'm leaning Michigan, not a heavy lean, but I'm leaning Michigan, is that these two teams, both really good on their defensive lines, really good linebackers, both of these teams. But one team has a more experienced and statistically better graded offensive line, and that's Michigan. This isn't like it's by a significant margin. I'm not sitting here saying that the Ohio State offensive line is washed. I'm not saying that. But when it all comes down to one of the most important primal things about football that we can always point to in a close Big Ten battle is who wins the line of scrimmage. And Michigan has the edge right now. Plain and simple, before this game is played, Michigan has the edge because their offensive line is more experienced. It has been more consistent. And we saw that when they're cooking, what they can do. Even when J.J. McCarthy plays bad, they ran all over Penn State's defensive line, which is pretty good.
Okay. You bring up the point in reference to McCarthy and this team and the more pieces around him of why you think they would win. McCarthy's ankle injury has nothing to do with his decision making. None. And the throw that he had in the red zone,
yes,
and the one that he had before that is very bad decision making. That is not an ankle thing. He threw into double coverage and the ball got picked. I think you bring up an interesting point, but I'm going to throw this out there to you. Why did Michigan get away from McCarthy throwing the football? Some say his ankle, but they still ran him. He still had 8 carries in that game for, I think, 46 yards or something like that. No, you're right. The right side of your offensive line was getting beat.
Specifically, their right tackle is the one.
Specifically, their right tackle. Yeah. I don't know that they superiorly have the better offensive line here. Now, I do think that they run the ball at a more effective rate, which I will sit here and agree. But I think both defenses are very stout. I think both secondaries are very stout. I think Ohio State's a top, secondary in the country statistically, and then followed by them is Michigan, which, by the way, is tied with Louisville of all teams and Notre Dame. But I look at this, Joe, and I just ask the question, okay, have we seen McCarthy, I wrote this down. I just want to make this known. McCarthy in the last couple of games, yes, has not looked great. He went, I think, 6 of 8, 7 of 8 against Penn State, 6 yards, 8 carries, 34 yards, whatever it was. I, again, don't remember. But, Joe, in these big profile games, not named Ohio State last year in the second half, I mean, look how he did against TCU. I do question when he faces a defense like this, what he will look like. Like, have we seen JJ against a really good defense?
It's a very good point.
Have we seen him perform at a high level? Now, I've seen Kyle McCord against a very stout Notre Dame defense. We just talked about them being the second best rush defense and pass defense. Like, Notre Dame does not allow you to run the football. It's the reason that they're tied for 2. The bottom line for me is kind of simple. All right. I've seen McCord get tested, and I told you a couple weeks ago. Now, look, I said that Marvin Harrison Jr. didn't deserve to get his name or be a part of the Heisman discussion. Last week, he had 3 catches for 30-some-odd yards, kind of taken out of the game. But if Ohio State's going to win, it's going to come off of him. You're going to have to find ways to get the ball down the field to him, okay, in multiple ways. Michigan last week, okay, they did some good things. They had a couple of picks. Number 0 had a couple of picks, looked good. I also saw Prather and Johnson on one-on-one coverage get beat by a wide receiver core that is not better than what Ohio State has. Cade Stover is another guy that I look in this game that I think can have a really big impact from front to bottom. But both teams are going to use their tight ends a lot here. I agree with you on one thing, though. I don't like for Ohio State that this game's at Michigan. I really don't, because everything that is building around Michigan, all the crap that's building around Michigan, them being on the road, okay, is why I don't favor them. Now, I'm not going to make a pick here tonight because I'm still working through that in my mind. But I say to myself, can Kyle McCord go on the road and beat a really damn good Michigan team? I don't know if he can. Like, I just don't.
Well, so this is where I'm kind of at right now. I think that the quarterback situation really heavily comes into play with this, because this isn't CJ Stroud. This is Kyle McCord. I really do believe that him being a much more steady player is an advantage, because, again, as we've reiterated this multiple times, JJ McCarthy, if he has a bad football game and he starts to slide like he does, he's one of the few guys that I just don't do he doesn't do a very good job of recovering. He really does not. When he starts playing bad, he plays bad the entirety of the game. He'll make some recovery throws, but he still continuously makes mistakes throughout games. That does provide an advantage for Kyle McCord. It also provides an advantage that you just talked about, that he's been a little bit more battle tested. We've seen him step up to the plate against Notre Dame, against Penn State, not making big time, important, crazy throws. It's not like he's making Drake May, Caleb Williams types throws, but he still converted and was able to get first downs in situations where the game was on the line. That stuff deserves recognition. I think that is important for factoring into this game. But if he plays in totality the game that he played against Notre Dame, that version of Kyle McCord, that's not good enough to beat Michigan. I don't think that it is. They advantageously were able to win that game because of the ineptitude of Notre Dame's offense. And also, let's think back to why they were able to beat Penn State, because Penn State's offense was garbage. They couldn't move the ball. Drew Allar played terrible. I'm just a little bit wary here that our perception of Ohio State might be a little bit altered because they were in matchups where they were able to take advantage of some really bad offenses. And I understand that Michigan played Penn State, but I feel like, and Ohio State fans aren't going to agree with this, I feel like Michigan's win over Penn State felt a little bit more dominant than Ohio State's did.
Yeah, because they ran the ball right at them.
Yeah.
But that's what they had to do to win. If Penn State had any semblance of an offense or could have scored at any semblance at all, okay, I do think Michigan's in trouble.
Yeah, obviously.
I mean, because they threw the ball 8 times. Now, I keep hearing, here's the other side of that, talking about the other quarterback. I hear from Michigan fans, oh, well, he's been dealing with an ankle injury since week 2. Well, why is it just an issue now? His ankle injury has nothing to do with the decisions that he's been making, right? It also doesn't change the fact that you have a Mbuka. It doesn't change the fact that Marvin Harrison's on the outside. They have not seen a receiving trio, I'll throw Stover in there, like this. Now, if Maryland can get off on them, what allows me, Joe, to believe that Ohio State cannot do that?
Again, this is all kind of factors into why I'm not heavily leaning one side. I'm not heavily leaning.
What's interesting?
What?
Go look at the scores of these games. These defenses aren't the first time that they've been this good. It's not.
What do you mean by that?
Go look at it, like how highly scored upon these defenses have been in this matchup over the last 10 years. It's not a 9-6 game like we had with LSU and Bama in 2011. That's not the team. That's not what we've been getting. I think that Ohio State has a serious matchup on the outside with him. If they do push Mbuka to the outside and Marvin Harrison being there, there's a big time mismatch, massive mismatch.
But part of what deservedly needs to get brought up here is that most of these receivers were the same receivers last year. And
it does not matter what everybody keeps saying. Well, that's what they were last year.
I'm saying that this matchup has the receivers and the corners that faced off last year. Most of them are the same as this year. What I'm getting at, and I'm not saying that this is a reason to support Michigan further. All I'm saying is that we've seen this matchup before. But I'm agreeing with you here. If Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka, they don't need to go off and have like the craziest games of their careers. But if they play the way that we know that they can, which is combining for 200 yards receiving, they win the football game. It all comes down to what they do, because if you can,
they can do it. If McCord plays the way that he's been playing, he can do it.
I just am so fearful that I feel like he is not a guy that likes to take shots and be aggressive. I feel like that he doesn't. I don't want to say skittish.
Marvin Harrison has a lot of big time fade route catches in the back of the end zone all year.
He does, but we also have a number. We also have a number of games, though. We have a number of games, though, where he has like 3 catches for 30 yards. I'm not saying he's got a lot of them, but he's got a couple of games where his stat line is tiny.
That doesn't match.
That's Kyle McCord. That's not Marvin Harrison.
But no, that's Marvin Harrison. If he's not throwing Marvin Harrison the ball, doesn't mean that he's not taking shots. We've seen him take shots to other players. I don't agree with that.
No,
I don't agree with that.
I don't agree with that. I think that the Indiana game is a perfect example of Marvin Harrison not getting the ball and him being open.
Joe, he was his first start ever. He didn't even know he was a starter.
He played with him in high school and he wouldn't throw him the ball. That's the guy that you go to. He played with him in high school.
First start that he ever had, and you're going all the way back to week 1 like the kid hasn't progressed throughout the year.
It's not like he's significantly, vastly improved.
The fuck he hadn't.
He's
Joe,
taking some steps forward, but we're acting like he's
a few steps forward. I hate that this is your favorite team. What in the hell would you call that Notre Dame win? That's not a just small step forward.
I don't think that anything, and he did that in that game. And I just said this earlier.
You mean like 4th and 18?
We even said this after the Notre Dame Ohio State game, that if he plays that way against Michigan, they don't win the game. And I'm reiterating that point right now. We agreed on that back then.
Well, yeah, because he damn near went under 500, but he hasn't been that bad. You can, and here's another crazy thing. The light bulb can click on at any time. The light bulb clicked on in that last drive, and he has not looked, to that point, he has not looked as bad as he did in those first 3 quarters against Notre Dame. And you know that he hasn't.
We also have, what happened at the Wisconsin game? We all remember what happened in that Wisconsin game.
He threw a touchdown to win it.
He still had a number of head-scratching turnovers. Was it 1 pick or 2 picks that he threw in that game? That was one of his worst games of the season.
But I mean, it's like, okay, what about J.J. McCarthy?
I'm not saying that he's heads below J.J. McCarthy, but J.J. McCarthy has at least won this matchup before and played in this matchup.
Kyle McCord's never started in this matchup, so how do you know?
That's part of the point here. The quarterback matchup is very important. But
okay, so basically what you're saying is you trust what's his name? J.J. McCarthy over him.
I'm not saying that, but what I'm trying to get at here is that there is not some vast difference between the two of them. They both have their own problems. And I at least have a game where J.J. McCarthy dominated last year and played his ass off.
I do think that McCarthy presents a more dynamic playmaking aspect than McCord. I won't deny that at all. I'm not going to deny that. I don't think that you can deny that. He has played better than him throughout the year, though. Vastly better because he's got more attempts. He's got more yards. He has more touchdowns. And to be honest with you, they're tied in interceptions. And McCarthy has almost 100 less attempts.
Because they don't need to throw the ball as much.
They're going to have to throw the ball in this one.
We have to bring up, though.
Do you really think that Michigan is just going to be able to run the ball like they did?
No, I don't think so. And I think that there's going to be an emphasis to load the box and slow them down. But we got to admit here that the way that they ran the ball against Penn State, they're not going to run the same way. But that's a pretty good shade of that. If for whatever reason the passing game isn't opening up, obviously if JJ McCarthy throws multiple picks and shits his pants, it's a completely different conversation. But if they're not finding the success that they want, we know that they have that in their bag to run the ball aggressively downhill. I can't say the same thing about Ohio State. They can go multiple tight ends, pack everything in, heavy formation, downhill. It sounds like you're picking Ohio State. I said this when we did the.
No, I'm not. But I'm not picking them. But I'm not picking them. Okay, I don't know who I'm picking. But Joe, what I think is happening here is I think that we both agree on the fact of that both of these teams are remotely really close. I mean, look, the truth is because it's a 4-point game. So what am I being told from a Vegas line standpoint? All right, home field advantage is 3 points. So basically you're putting this as a 1-score game, right?
1 point game.
Or 1 point game, excuse me. Okay. I don't think that, look, Michigan has not faced a team like this. I don't think Michigan's really tested enough at this point to say, hey, this is going to work, this is going to work, this is going to work. No, because quite honestly, in the last 2 weeks, where I could make the argument that you face, I think Maryland, as an example, is one of the better teams that they saw on the road.
Yeah,
now, I know that they're at home, and I get all of that. All I'm saying is I've seen Ohio State get battle tested more, I feel like, than Michigan. And I feel like if this is going to be a close game, let me give an example.
Okay.
You know how when that game against Michigan and Penn State, it was really close, and you just kind of felt like there was no way that Penn State was going to be able to go down the field and score?
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State can go down the field and score on you. They can. And you know what else? I think Maryland exposed them a little bit that what they have on the boundary. Do you believe that McCord's not better than the Tagovailoa kid? Because I do think he's better.
He is. I am not a Tagovailoa fan.
Also, I believe, tell me if I'm wrong here, Ohio State has better weapons on the outside than Maryland does.
Yes, obviously.
Okay. So you're not going to be able to just bully down like you did against Penn State. And to be real with you, when you need to go down the field and score to completely close the game out against Maryland, again, one of the better teams that you saw.
Well, here's one thing that's very important for the Maryland game and other games this season. And it comes into play the Penn State game, all this stuff. Ohio State's offensive line does have weaknesses. In the interior, at center, I like Simmons, the one tackle that they brought in. I think he came in from San Diego State. I was a fan of his film as a draft prospect. But they do not have the same caliber of an offensive line that they had last year. Last year's offensive line put out 3 guys to the NFL that are all playing really damn good football. DeJuan Jones, Paris Johnson, Luke Whippler, they're all playing at a really high level. The guys that have replaced all 3 of those positions have not been at that same level, nearly that same level. The rotation capability and the guy, they're too deep with NFL players, NFL starters on that defensive line. Mason Graham, Josiah Stewart, Derek Moore. I could go on and on. That group is really freaking talented. And while their secondary has been inconsistent, Will Johnson is still probably going to be a top 50 pick in next year's draft, not this upcoming draft. It doesn't matter if they're struggling to keep up with Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison Jr., because there will be plays that they hit home, and they hit home for big sacks. I don't know if I can say the same thing that Ohio State is going to have that same level of ease going after J.J. McCarthy. That happened in the Maryland game too.
They're going to put 44 on that right tackle, and he's going to eat.
It's a fair point.
Okay,
it's a fair point. But we saw. My point is that we saw in this Maryland game. Yes, there were all these big chunk plays, and you're just like, how the hell did they get this ball off, and how is this guy this wide open? And then the ensuing play, they're all over Talia Tagovailoa's ass. Like, they're up his ass in a second.
But he's not. But those same things are not going to happen with McCord, I don't think, because I think he's got better personnel around him.
He is nowhere near as elusive as Talia Tagovailoa. At least he can try to evade.
Cute. But he also doesn't have the offensive line as bad as Maryland's either. So again,
Maryland's offensive line's not good, but like, they're not dumpster bad. They're not horribly bad.
We do have a super chat here from L70. Says, Joe, watch Michigan's O-line. They are horrible in pass. I think he's trying to say pro, and aren't that good at run blocking either. Barnhart is trash, and Keegan is a liability.
I don't disagree on the pass protection thing, because yes, we saw the issues that they had against Penn State, which is part of the reason why they just completely abandoned throwing the ball. They didn't want to get J.J. McCarthy killed. I disagree on the run blocking stuff. I have watched a lot of their way too much of their film, evaluating some of their prospects. And look, the interior of that offensive line is just really physical. They are so downhill. They're built to just physically overpower. Michael Hall Jr., Tyleik Williams are 2 of the best defensive tackles in the country, so it's not going to be an easy task. But we can't act like their run game, their run blocking has been bad.